In just 7 seconds, people decide if you're likable, trustworthy, and competent. Your brain makes 1,000 computations in that time, and most happens before you ever speak a word. Your brain operates as an extraordinarily sophisticated decision-making apparatus, processing vast quantities of information at speeds that far exceed conscious awareness. Within 1/10 of a second of encountering another person, your neural systems have already conducted an intricate analysis of trustworthiness, competence, and likability. This phenomenon, rooted in evolutionary biology, emerges from millennia of human survival necessity. Our ancestors required rapid threat assessment to navigate their environment safely. Today, despite living in a fundamentally different world, this neurobiological predisposition remains deeply embedded within our psychological architecture. The remarkable aspect of this instantaneous judgment lies not in its speed, but in its durability. Research in social psychology demonstrates that these initial impressions, crystallized by the 7th second of interaction, possess remarkable permanence. They function as cognitive anchors, shaping how subsequent information is filtered, interpreted, and integrated into our overall perception of another individual. Once established, these impressions demonstrate considerable resistance to change, a phenomenon psychologists term the primacy effect. The brain essentially creates a narrative framework within which all future interactions are understood and evaluated. This 7-second window encompasses a complex interplay of nonverbal communication, sensory data, and subconscious pattern recognition. The human visual system processes facial expressions, body language, and proxemics simultaneously, while auditory systems analyze vocal tone, speech patterns, and linguistic choices. Together, these elements create a multisensory impression that bypasses rational deliberate operating instead through intuitive processing systems that have evolved over generations. Understanding this neurobiological reality carries profound implications for interpersonal dynamics. The recognition that initial judgments crystallize so rapidly compels individuals to consider the intentionality behind their presentation. Your appearance, posture, eye contact, and vocal quality qualitatively communicate information that shapes how others perceive your character, capability, and credibility before substantive interaction occurs. This awareness itself becomes a tool for psychological optimization and enhanced interpersonal effectiveness. Human communication operates through multiple simultaneous channels, yet psychology reveals that the most powerful conduits of information remain entirely nonverbal. Body language, appearance, and tone collectively constitute approximately 93% of communicative impact, relegating explicit verbal content to a surprisingly minor role in shaping interpersonal perception. This distribution of communicative weight reflects the evolutionary hierarchy of human information processing, where threat detection and authenticity assessment occur through channels that predate language itself. Body language functions as an unfiltered window into psychological states and intentions. The human nervous system unconsciously broadcasts emotional authenticity through postural alignment, gestural patterns, and spatial positioning. When individuals maintain an open posture with shoulders relaxed and forward-facing orientation, they signal confidence and receptivity. Conversely, crossed arms, hunched shoulders, and averted gaze transmit defensiveness or disengagement. These corporeal expressions operate beneath conscious control mechanisms, making them extraordinarily credible indicators of genuine psychological states. The brain recognizes this authenticity, instinctively trusting bodily communication over carefully constructed verbal narratives. Appearance extends beyond aesthetic considerations into profound psychological territory. Clothing, grooming, and physical presentation communicate status, competence, and respect for social contexts. The brain rapidly categorizes individuals based on visual information, integrating appearance cues into broader assessments of reliability and capability. This process, though potentially biased, remains deeply influential in shaping initial evaluations and subsequent relationship trajectories. Vocal tone represents the third pillar of nonverbal communication, carrying emotional resonance that transcends semantic content. The voice communicates through pitch variation, pace modulation, and intensity fluctuation, elements that reveal emotional authenticity and psychological conviction. A calm, measured tone suggests control and confidence, while hesitant or elevated speech patterns suggest uncertainty or anxiety. These three elements, body language, appearance, and tone, function as an integrated communication system that precedes and frames verbal interaction. Before consciously processing your words, the human brain has already conducted comprehensive psychological assessment through these nonverbal channels, establishing foundational impressions that prove remarkably resistant to subsequent modification. The primacy effect represents one of the most robust and well-documented phenomena in cognitive psychology, demonstrating with remarkable consistency that initial information received disproportionately influences all subsequent perception and interpretation. When individuals encounter another person, their brain constructs a cognitive framework, a psychological template through which all future information is filtered, evaluated, and integrated. This initial framework possesses extraordinary resilience, functioning as an interpretive lens that shapes how new data is processed and understood. The neurobiological mechanisms underlying the primacy CT operate through selective attention and memory consolidation processes. The brain allocates heightened cognitive resources to initial information, encoding it more deeply into memory networks than subsequently presented data. This preferential encoding creates what neuroscientists term a semantic scaffold, an organizational structure upon which additional information is layered and interpreted. Subsequent information that aligns with this initial framework receives confirmation bias processing, while contradictory information is often minimized, reinterpreted, or simply disregarded through motivated reasoning. The psychological consequences of this phenomenon extend far beyond mere impression formation. Once a primacy effect becomes established, it initiates a self-fulfilling prophecy dynamic. People unconsciously seek information that confirms their initial assessment, while avoiding or discounting contradictory evidence. They interpret ambiguous behaviors through the lens of their existing impression, effectively transforming neutral actions into confirming data points. This creates a psychological feedback loop, where initial impressions become increasingly entrenched regardless of objective reality. Research in social psychology demonstrates that reversing primacy effects requires substantial effort and concentrated exposure to contradictory information. The brain demonstrates remarkable inertia when defending established perceptions, actively resisting reappraisal, even when presented with compelling evidence. This occurs because the initial impression has become neurologically integrated, connected to broader network patterns that structure identity perception and behavioral expectations. Understanding the primacy effect's power illuminates why the 7-second window proves so consequential. Those initial seconds create the foundational cognitive framework that governs all subsequent relationship dynamics. This recognition underscores the profound importance of intentional self-presentation during initial encounters, as the impressions formed during these critical moments establish psychological trajectories that prove remarkably difficult to alter. The psychology of self-presentation reveals a fundamental truth about human interaction. Your external presentation functions as a powerful psychological communication system that operates entirely independent of character or actual competence. Clothing, posture, eye contact, and grooming constitute what psychologists term impression management, the strategic curation of observable elements to shape how others perceive and interact with you. This process is neither superficial nor manipulative. Rather, it reflects the legitimate reality that perception shapes treatment and treatment shapes outcomes. Neuropsychological research demonstrates that the human brain processes visual information hierarchically, prioritizing physical appearance and postural alignment before engaging more complex analytical processes. Communicates instantly recognizable information about professional status, social positioning, and contextual appropriateness. A well-tailored suit signals competence and authority, while carefully selected casual attire communicates approachability and authenticity. These sartorial choices bypass rational deliberation, triggering automatic psychological responses that precede conscious awareness. The observer's brain categorizes you within milliseconds based on visual data, integrating appearance cues into broader competence assessments. Posture functions as a silent yet powerful psychological communicator. Upright spinal alignment with shoulders back transmits confidence and psychological presence, while slouched positioning communicates resignation or diminished agency. Neuroscience reveals that postural positioning actually influences internal psychological states through proprioceptive feedback. Maintaining confident posture literally elevates testosterone levels and reduces cortisol, creating psychological states that manifest as genuine confidence. This bidirectional relationship between external presentation and internal psychology means that intentional postural adjustment creates authentic psychological transformation. Eye contact represents perhaps the most psychologically loaded nonverbal behavior. Sustained eye contact signals honesty, confidence, and engagement, triggering mirror neuron responses that facilitate connection. Conversely, averted gaze communicates discomfort or deception, activating psychological suspicion. These ocular patterns activate deep limbic structures involved in threat detection and trust assessment, operating beneath conscious control. Your presentation, every sartorial choice, postural decision, and gestural movement, functions as psychological architecture constructing how others perceive your character, capability, and credibility. This recognition empowers intentional self-optimization, transforming presentation from vanity into strategic psychological communication. The 7 seconds have already begun. Right now, in this very moment, someone is forming an impression of you that will shape every interaction you'll ever have with them. The question isn't whether you're being judged, you are. The question is, are you intentionally designing that judgment or leaving it to chance? Your presentation isn't about deception, it's about psychological authenticity. It's about ensuring that how the world sees you reflects who you actually are. Because in 7 seconds, your brain has already decided your fate. The question now is, what will it decide?